Like many Metal Gear Solid fans, I have been frustrated by how quiet it's been for the last few years. And then things started to heat up a little. There was the announcement of Metal Gear Solid 3, the remake known as Metal Gear Solid Delta, and the Legacy Collection, Parts 1 and Part 2, which will be coming hopefully very soon. But then the last couple of days something really crazy happened, and it sent the community into a bit of a spin. People are theorizing, and there's all kinds of fan theories, conspiracy theories, what have you. But what has come to light? Well, we now know that the man himself, Hideo Kojima, is creating an entirely new franchise, or so he says. The franchise is a stealth action genre-based game, and it's called Physint. So what does Physint mean? Well, there's been a few theories, and the one that sticks out is it means physical intelligence. So in the setting of stealth action espionage, physical intelligence, that could mean, and I think it means, physically going out into the field and collecting intel. This could be in a spy capacity, in a military capacity. There are lots of different ways that you could apply this to an espionage game. You don't necessarily have to have it in a combat system. You could literally have a guy in a suit walk into an office building and have the mission for him to collect papers or steal a file. Or if you want to be more on the nose and more in the spirit of the Metal Gear games that we've had in the past, you could have this on a battlefield. You could worm your way through the battlefield and try and avoid detection and steal something or acquire someone. But this is really drove the fandom into a complete spin. People are theorizing all kinds of interesting little nuggets. And the one that really sticks out, obviously, is this a Metal Gear game? Well, I don't know. People did the same thing with Death Stranding. When Hideo Kojima was developing that game, everyone was saying, this is something to do with Metal Gear. And it turned out not to be. What you have to remember is the separation between Konami and Kojima means that Kojima making a Metal Gear game off his own back without the input of Konami is very unlikely because of legal reasons. Konami owned the Metal Gear Solid franchise. How could Kojima go away and do his own thing without getting himself in big legal hot water? One thing I will say is that Kojima is the master of deception. He loves to toy with the fandom. He loves to troll people. So for the sake of fun, let's get into this. What if Kojima and Konami, behind the scenes and in secret, have come to some kind of agreement? If they've managed to find common ground, go over their problems, work something out, and between the two of them decided to come out with probably one of the biggest comebacks in video game history, which would be a Kojima written and created Metal Gear game. So what evidence is there for this? Well, there's not much. The game Physint, we know, is going to be stealth action espionage. And Kojima isn't stupid. He knows that as soon as people see those words, action espionage, they're going to think of Metal Gear. How could you not? He had to know that everyone would be foaming at the mouth saying, this has got to be something to do with Metal Gear. Well, it might be. Then again, it could be completely its own thing. And I would be up for that too. But like I said, for the sake of fun, let's just theorise and geek out for a minute. So, this, if we're saying it is in the Metal Gear universe, this could be a Metal Gear game without any Metal Gears. The name Physint, if that is the title, and we know that Kojima, would throw red herrings out there by giving us fake titles, fake trailers. Sometimes he'd create a fake game company. But if this is called Physint and they're not going with the title Metal Gear, this could be a Metal Gear game that doesn't contain any Metal Gears. We know that Metal Gear was a concept that was invented by Granin in Metal Gear Solid 3, and it was carried over to the States and developed upon by the Americans. Eventually Huey Emmerich got hold of the plans, and so on. The proto-Metal Gear was the Shagohod, which appeared in 1964. So what world could we potentially be looking at without any Metal Gears? Well, here's a theory that I have. What if this game is a non-Metal Gear game set in World War II, starring the boss and the Cobra unit? You could have the boss not quite involved in World War II, because we know the Americans didn't get involved in that war straight away. But you have to believe that in the world of Metal Gear, they would have had spies and intel agents out there collecting data, maybe in the battlefield, maybe, like I say, slinking their way like a snake through the battlefield, finding out information, trying to ascertain certain things about the Nazis and the Germans and what they were up to, and collecting data, intel, all that kind of good stuff. You'd be able to showcase the boss, and as I've said before, one of the strongest things from the last Metal Gear game, Metal Gear Solid: The Phantom Pain, was the buddy system. Now, how awesome would it be if you play as the boss and were able to select one, maybe two buddies in the Cobra unit? You could have the boss doing basically the same thing that Big Boss and Snake does. She's a soldier, a complete badass, CQC expert. She sneaks around, she uses conventional weapons, but then she's got this unconventional buddy in, say, the Fury. Now, you could see the Fury zipping around the map, similar to how Quiet did, moving at super fast speeds, turning invisible, cloaking, taking out enemies and marking things on a map. That's what Quiet did. You could have the End marking enemies, shooting them from a distance, clearing the path for the boss to sneak into facilities, sneak through the battlefield, whatever. So that is one idea. Another idea would be to, I guess, have spin-offs. Not every game needs to be about these core characters. You could set a Metal Gear game far in the future. I mean, really, what do we know of the Metal Gear universe? It's basically from the 1960s to the mid-2010s. Really, if you think about it, that's not a massive span of time. What if we went beyond that and we had sort of a 20 minutes in the future kind of setting, which would allow us to have future tech and maybe a new protagonist or a series of new protagonists? Get away from the legacy of the boss, big boss, the snakes, and potentially create something new. I'd be interested to see that. I would be pretty sad to see the legacy of the boss and big boss and the snakes go away. But I'd be up for an expansion of the Metal Gear universe in general. And spin-offs are a good way to create a healthy franchise. Franchises don't just go away now, and I don't see the Metal Gear Solid franchise just being allowed to die. There are other things that can be done with it. I do believe that Kojima and Konami could come to some kind of accord, and it has happened before with other companies. So, as an example, I want to talk for a couple of seconds about Image Comics. There was an Image comic called Spawn. This was an awesome comic. It was a comic about a soldier that dies, goes to hell, he's reborn as a demon, and he comes back and kicks all kind of ass. Hang on a second. Does that sound kind of familiar? Anyway, Spawn was murdered by a guy called Chapel. Now, Chapel was his best friend, and Chapel was a badass assassin with a skull on his face. Hang on a second. Doesn't that sound kind of familiar? Anyway, Chapel was from another book, a book by another creator. Spawn was created by Todd McFarlane. Chapel was created by Rob Liefeld in the Youngblood series. Chapel was brought over to Spawn to create a continuity between the Image comic books. However, as the 90s progressed, some of the creators started to fall out, and unfortunately there was a falling out between Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld, and unfortunately there had to be a retcon. Chapel was taken out of the main book, but he was so deeply ingrained at this point that they created an animated series, and they had no choice but to leave the Chapel character in. They'd already written and recorded all the lines, created all the animation. And so, unfortunately, it was kind of a messy occurrence. You've got this character that Todd McFarlane didn't own. He's fallen out with the creator of that character, but they're forced to sort of make this thing happen, and it really did muddy up the waters and was one of the things that really led to a bit of a lull in the interest in Spawn, because it made it really difficult to follow. I think a similar thing has happened, albeit in different circumstances, to Metal Gear. There's been a falling out between the main creator and the company, and now we are in a situation where we've got non-Kojima-minded, let's say, people creating a Kojima game. Now, they've not strayed too far from the path at the moment, because all they're doing so far is a remake. But it would give, I think, fans a certain amount of anxiety if they went further and created a fully fledged Metal Gear Solid game without Kojima's input. Now, I think that what we could have is a situation where, like Rob Liefeld and McFarlane, they put their differences aside and are able to move forward. So, with all that in mind, talking about Spawn has really gotten my creative juices flowing, and I always harken back to the Metal Gear Solid series when I think of Spawn. Spawn was one of my favourite comics back in the 90s, especially around 98, 99, when I discovered Metal Gear Solid. And I also discovered at that time that the creator of Spawn had made Metal Gear Solid action figures, which I absolutely devoured and still sit happily on my figure shelf to this day. But one thing that Spawn did, and this is linking back to creating a healthy franchise and spin-off ideas, etc., etc. Spawn created an animated show. Now, I know there has been talk of Metal Gear movies, but I'd be more interested in an R-rated Metal Gear anime. Now, just imagine you've got characters like the cyborg ninja chopping people's arms and heads off. There's blood everywhere. There's F words and all kinds of curse words. And also there's the darker elements of espionage. You've got creeping around. You've got subterfuge, secrets and lies. All that good stuff that you can do with anime. Plus, you've got giant robot mechs trying to destroy the world. And you've got genetically enhanced super soldiers that would be able to be viewed in their full glory, which is cheaper than doing in something like a film. Also, the idea of a Metal Gear film, it gives me a certain level of anxiety because I think the overarching story in the world really needs something like a series because there's just too much to fit into a film. But the spin-off idea is really what intrigues me here. You could have an anime, and then maybe to link in with that, you could have comics. One of my favourite things that the fandom has created over the last few years is an amazing amount of beautiful fan art. And something that I recently saw was a bunch of classic comic-inspired covers that had to do with the Metal Gear universe. And that really got my creative juices pumping because I saw one called Cyborg Ninjas. Now just imagine that for a second. A spin-off comic called Cyborg Ninjas. A spin-off comic called The Adventures of the Cobra Unit. A spin-off comic called The Continuing Adventures of the Diamond Dogs. All these elements are just ripe for using in some kind of massive Metal Gear franchise revival. Make spin-offs, make animes, make comics, make toys, key rings, posters, lunchboxes. Bring everything together and just have fun with it. I think Kojima is at an age where he'll probably want to think about his legacy, leaving behind a massive legacy. And I know he's an artistic guy and an auteur, but really, what do people love about Hideo Kojima? It's Metal Gear. We want more. We need more. We are clamoring for more. I hope that Metal Gear Solid Delta does absolutely fantastically. I hope that Kojima is able to figure something out with Konami, even if it's not an in-house agreement. If he's able to come in and do his own thing, do some writing, do some directing in like a work for hire capacity, shake hands and go away again and allow him to work on his other works like Death Stranding and the Kojima production stuff. But maintain a relationship that allows this amazing franchise that he's created to thrive. Anyway, those are my thoughts on recent events. I will have more thoughts, I'm sure, but I really feel like the conversation of Metal Gear Solid has really come back into the fore in recent times. I think the advent of the Legacy Collection and the announcements that were made on the MGS3 remake really shows just how hungry people are. We don't all agree on certain things and how certain things should be done and managed, but I still think it shows how hungry and desperate we are for content. And if you're anything like me, you want to see the t-shirts, the toys, the comics. Let's bring it all back. Let's get a conversation going, and let's let the people at the top know that we love this franchise. We want it to do well, and we want it to survive and thrive. Anyway, guys, I hope you got some enjoyment from listening to me ramble on about my absolute favourite franchise there. And if you enjoy my ramblings, or even if you just want to put things like this on in the background and fall to sleep while a strange British guy talks in your ear about computer games, consider giving me a like, comment, or more importantly, subscribe to the channel, and you'll get notifications of when I put Metal Gear stuff up, which I intend to do for the foreseeable future, because I'm really enjoying talking about this again, and I feel pumped for the future of Metal Gear for the first time in a long while. Okay, guys, I'll catch you in the next one.